Everyone knows the experience of anxiety. Anxiety is about loss, the loss of belief that we live in a safe world, the loss of our belief that people can be trusted to do good, the loss of belief in a God who will protect the innocent and the vulnerable, the loss of a belief that faith is strong enough to overcome all adversity. So I have given this address the title, Anxiety, Everyone's Daily Concern. Anxiety's powerless religion. Sam Harris, back in 2004, published this book called The End of Faith, and the subtitle says Religion, Terror, and the Future of Reason. And the book opens with a description of a young man wearing an overcoat. Beneath the overcoat, he is wearing a bomb. His pockets are filled with nails, ball bearings, and rat poison. And the book ends with such words as these: the days of our religious identities are clearly numbered, and perhaps also the days of our civilization are likewise numbered. So when your Bible says, in stillness and quietness you'll find your strength, surely we doubt if that strength will stand up to the chaos and the violence and the mayhem often seen in modern life. Yet again and again I've directed you to the title of Angela Mackenzie's book. Angela is one of us within this congregation. She's a pediatrician. And remember, she wrote this book, and the title is called Everybody Stay Calm. Surely, in the midst of every flurry and worry, in the face of everyone's uncertainty, our impulsiveness, and our irrational looseness, everybody stay calm is a good coping directive. But what do we do next? In this address today, I propose to do 4 things. One, I'm going to describe several aspects of your well-known anxiety. I will point, secondly, to different ways of managing your anxiety. And thirdly, I will acknowledge how ineffective some religion has been in helping us manage that anxiety. And fourth, I will try to bring together the conception of a new faith, a new religion, or a different slant on religion, carrying a therapeutic psychology to see if we can reach a better management of our anxieties. I wrote 2 volumes on the traumas of life and their treatment several years ago. And then in this volume, I set out 6 major traumas and the anxieties that are inevitably part of those traumas. What is the first major trauma in our life? The threat of life to life itself. Second, the threat to our self, our identity, the integrity of our self, our view of ourself. The third trauma, the loss of a valued relationship. The fourth, the loss of our known ways of functioning. If you've lost your legs, if you've lost your eyesight, that's loss of functioning. That was number 4. Number 5 is the upheaval to your worldview. We always thought the world would be like this. We always thought these good things would happen. And there's a turbulence takes place. That's a huge trauma. And the 6th was the loss of faith in life and the goodness of life, in the very soul of our humanity. Now, anxiety follows on all of those traumas. Indeed, such is our life that anxiety precedes those traumas. Anxiety can be about what has happened in the past and what might happen in the future. And that anxiety gets into us and can do much damage. It gets into the way we think, gets into the way we feel, it gets into our relationships, it gets into our memories, it gets into our bodies, it gets into our health. Anxiety gets into our habits. There is a habit of anxiety, a behavior of anxiety. Paul Tillich, a name well known to us here, wrote this little book ages ago called The Courage to Be, a unique theologian of the 20th century. Died in the same year as Martin Buber, in fact. And both of them have had a huge influence on my life and on St. Michael's here over these last 45 years. Tillich wrote one of the most acclaimed books on anxiety. And in it, The Courage to Be, he named the 3 anxieties which he thought affected us in our lives, perhaps at different times of our evolution, different times of our civilization. The anxiety of emptiness and meaninglessness. The anxiety of our guilt and rejection. The anxiety of fate and death. The anxiety of what is ahead of us. They were relevant back there. They're probably relevant now. But if I said that to my young grandchildren, I thought they'd probably say yes. Go on. So before they said that, I asked them, so what is your major anxiety? What will I say today in this address? And one of them said, my biggest anxiety is the anxiety of comparison. Social comparison. Comparing myself with other people. How they perform. What they look like. How many friends they have. How many friends I have. The anxiety of comparison was very important. And the other one said, no, it's more like feeling I'm accepted. Oh, accepted. Accepted. Reliably. How can I rely on my friends? Because I'm not sure I can. They come, they go. How can the anxiety is to find lasting enjoyment in my relationships. Because nobody wants to have a continuing relationship. And the first one came back and said, I think we ought to add the anxiety of being safe. He comes, as many of you know, he comes from the city of Tokyo, living here in Melbourne meantime. But he has been aware that whereas Tokyo is, to all observation, a very safe city, he soon found that Melbourne was not a safe city. So he's affected by safety and the anxiety of danger. So one of them turned it around and said, but anxiety can be good. Anxiety shows that there's danger ahead and we can avoid it. Anxiety tells us we're on the wrong pathway. There's another direction to take. Anxiety tells us we're being too over-dependent, too needy. Anxiety tells us who to trust. Anxiety can be a troublesome, turbulent experience, but it can also be a good teacher. A good teacher, a good test of your adaptational capabilities, a good training in resilience, a good training in resilience and your inner trust in yourself. Your everyday anxieties can be part of the larger family of anxieties, neurotic anxieties, when you worry about things you needn't worry about, when you jam up with all sorts of obsessions, when you develop various disorders of anxiety and so on, out of control. Many people are surprised to discover how anxiety plays such a large part in their physical illnesses, and how anxiety can play such a large part in our recovery process, or at least managing our anxiety better can play a large part in our recovery process. Of course, we know that we can develop effective defenses. Sigmund Freud spoke about them long ago. Defenses are there to protect us from too much anxiety. Sometimes our defenses can be part of a larger problem. The defenses themselves can become a problem. Additional anxieties. And it may be difficult for us to recognize what they're doing to us because they're camouflaged, hidden. Now I go on a little bit further. In addition to having defenses to defend us against anxieties, many of you know that I talk about release. The release mechanisms. We can learn how to develop ways to release us from our anxieties. Oddly enough, many people are rather reluctant to learn about their releases. Even the helping professions, when I start talking about them, they tend to close the book at that point, as if they don't want to hear about something which is so vital, I think, so valuable. And so sometimes I wonder if anxiety has become so much part of them that they think, well, that's normal, isn't it? That's how it is. Instead of saying, no, we can be released from, if not from our anxieties, from the way we've been handling those anxieties. So much part of our philosophy and our theology is that we live as if we don't want to find effective release from our anxieties. So let me take a glimpse in at religion. The conventional religion answers to our everyday anxiety. Those anxieties have been largely unsatisfactory, unsuccessful, though they continue to be dished out. We continue to hang on to them as if they should be effective. Instead of us saying, no, they are unsuccessful. Maybe we're not applying them appropriately. Anyway, as a result, many people say religion is no good anyway. Drop it. Or they keep their anxieties over there and they practice an evangelical or uptight or fundamentalist religion over here. The two are separate. So perhaps people settled for the religion filling certain needs, but having no relevance to their anxieties. Perhaps people of religions, the clergy, for example, had come to the notion that they should be like Jesus. Well, so they should, perhaps. But be like Jesus insofar as that he seemed to give an answer. He gave an answer. And so the religion people of the world also say, here's the answer. Here's the answer. And so it gets thrown at them without really asking, what sort of anxiety do you have? You're telling me you're very anxious, but before we give you the answer, perhaps we should analyze a little bit where we are. Now we know that different anxieties may require different management. Check me out. You check it in your own life. Your anxiety about having enough money in your old age, I think, is a different anxiety from the anxiety of your loneliness or social isolation. Or it's different from your anxiety about spiders in your bedroom. Or it's different from the anxiety of uncertainty about the future. Now, if all of those anxieties, and several others as well, if all of them start to congregate together and they gather more and more, you may not recognize that you can't cope with all those anxieties. And perhaps you ought to lift the pressure off yourself and say, I can't cope with all these anxieties. There are too many of them. And so you tend to become somewhat diffuse. I had an example of it here on Friday. I couldn't get into the car park because there's a fire had developed in a building in Little Collins Street. And so they prevented us from entering. And the people on the gateway into Little Collins Street kept telling us who wanted to come down there to park, drive round again. Drive round again. It'll be cleared soon. So we drove round again and again, and then we went. Now, when we were released from this embargo, people became crazy in their cars. They drove stupidly, dangerously, even into our own car park. As they came down the ramp, I thought, where do they think they are? Well, they were late, of course. They were late, so they thought they should drive furiously, crash their car into another car, and they'll be later still. But they're not thinking of that. That suddenly their anxiety overwhelmed them, and they had to act. Well, it may be unhelpful to reach a religious answer for such anxieties. So that is why I've advocated that any worthwhile theology needs a thoroughgoing therapeutic component, just as the words of Jesus consistently had a therapeutic component. Theology without that component has become a theology that is ultimately useless. Few people can manage many anxieties at the one time. So for 20 years and more, I've been teaching a therapy of mapping our anxieties. Every person has at least a dozen anxieties gathered around them at any one time. Many people here probably have not a dozen, but 2 dozen. And they may not be aware of how these anxieties are circling around you. Indeed, some have anxieties that are so hidden that they may not recognize how powerful they are in influencing their behavior, in influencing the decisions they make. So we map out our anxieties, and then we begin to filter and fence. There's a filter and fencing process to sort them out, to help us reach what might be the core anxiety that we can now deal with. And maybe if we deal with that anxiety, a few of these other foxes might go back to their den and be quiet. Might. So the next task is then to focus on the most likely resources that will hold our anxieties, that will contain those anxieties, rather than becoming diffuse and uncontrolled and out of control. So the theological solution needs to join the therapeutic component. First, to isolate the anxiety, the critical anxiety, the core anxiety. Then to identify the appropriate resources. And then to work at reducing the ongoing reactions to that anxiety, the impulsive, destructive, explosive, dangerous behaviours. So that we might reach a point where we say, what do we really want? Deep down, what do you really want? Do you want to be carrying these anxieties around with you for the next 20 years, for the next 2 years, for the next 2 months? Or do you really want to have a quiet, harmonious existence in quietness and stillness, we might find our strength. Is that our goal? If that's our goal, then keep that in mind. Rather than saying, no, I'm out of control, I've got to do this, I've got to go there, I've got to be here, I've got to be there. Perhaps the biblical word will be more appropriate as we focus on what we really want in our life, in the language of our new faith that I've set out for you, as you know, in my book. I said there, our most vital task is to connect with the best flow of life, the good energy, the connection that is in keeping with the new beginnings of your resurrections, starting again, discovering how to be really alive after being down in the ditch. So Sam Harris in his book said, at the end of the book, the end of the faith, end of, what does he say? The end of faith. So at the end of the book, he says, no personal God need be worshipped for us to live in awe at the beauty and immensity of creation. Well, he's right. He might be the poorer, but he's right. But when we try to understand the anxieties and aggravations of our existence, we're dealing with our inner world that we do not yet understand. We're dealing with our interpersonal anxieties and aggravations that we cannot reliably control. We're dealing with far-reaching consequences of anxieties and aggravations on the world scene that frightens us. They frighten us. They double our anxieties. And we surely need a faith. Surely we need a faith that will point us to something better. Surely we need a faith bigger than our destructiveness. A faith that will be a faith in dialogue and harmony. The goals of the world. Dialogue and harmony as persuasive pathways to our own inner harmony and indeed to our own health. Anyone can dismiss the myths, the parables of religion as powerless, as pointless, as meaningless, in the face of huge turbulence and anxiety. But what is faith if it is not sowing seeds for a better world? If it is not moving aside the things that choke out growth and something that will allow growth and life to flourish? We need to teach the ways of harmony to transcend our destructiveness. Perhaps to realize that we can be observers and we can be participants. We can observe what is happening to us, and we can decide whether we're going to be participants in that madness or in our chaos. But being an observer, we might be able to control our participation. We need to make sure that even our observation, our observing self, is accurate. Because so frequently we get connected, so much out of control in our participation that our observation self is out of control. You're not seeing things correctly. So get that back into control. And then maybe we can then be more ready to choose how we will participate, the observing self and the participating self, so that we move from being out of control as a mixed-up, observing, participating person. So what did he say? He said, will you notice that you can take seeds of growth, and plant them? Symbols, if you like, for us, symbols of that eternal planting of new seed that will surely, if allowed to grow, will flourish. We want to be part of a flourishing existence rather than a destructive existence. so that the result will be 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold flourishing. So let me see if I can recap for just a moment. You're going to walk from here and say, well, how do I cope with my anxiety? Our everyday anxieties. What did she say in her book? Everybody stay calm. Let me take my time to find the book, because we need to take our time to ponder it. If we're calm, we're more likely to have the observing self make a better appraisal. Calm. Second, we need to find ways to contain our anxiety, because it's likely to run out of control and become infectious to our own life and to other people's lives. Control, containment. We need to, thirdly, change our anxiety behaviour. Behaviour can run into chaos, into destructiveness, but we can change it. We need to be in charge of our anxiety reactions, because one thing to have the anxiety, but then we go on reacting to our anxiety and reacting to that anxiety. And we need to call on resources to help us cope. And we here in this place would say the faith resources, faith in ourselves as good human beings, faith in our self-worth, faith in the good self, faith in good relationships. That's real. These are real things. They're good resources, and they can become part of the cure. But in all that, we need courage. We need courage to say, yes, this faith is meaningful. It is a meaningful part of our existence, a deeply held existential part of a positive existence. So we want that faith to grow 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. Did you get my C's? Calmness, be in control, take charge, change your behaviour, change coping resources, courage. Would you please stand? Say with me the prayer of faith. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And the blessing. The blessing. May the God you see in all the colours of creation arouse in you a sense of awe and wonder. May the God who is a sacred presence be real to you. May the God who is a source of inspiration and courage keep calling you forwards. May your God go with you and bless you today and always.